Hey there, friends. David Paulides, Canadian Missing Project. And this is the executive producer, Huck, staring at the cruise poster in the background, saying, Dad, I want to go. The cruise, November 9th through the 16th, Symphony of the Seas, Royal Caribbean. Get the details at Gather Up, one word, Gather Up Events. Be me, Meldrum, Mariah Mayor, Ryan Goboleski, and a cast of thousands. Huck says, that's enough, Dad. Thank you very much. Well, I hope you're doing good today, because we have a big show for you. Yes, a super big show. And it has to do with the Dinky Creek cluster in Fresno County, California. We roll on. And we'll get more into that in a second. But for the people that don't know, Fresno County, located south of Lake Tahoe, it extends from the San Joaquin Valley all the way up into the mountains. It's a gigantic county. Fifth largest in state in the area. 6,011 square miles, has a population of about 1 million, and it has part of Yosemite National Park in it, and it also has Kings Canyon and Sequoia National Park. 3 national parks in one county. The county has 800 deputies. It's big. There's a lot of things about that county that have baffled me over the years. Many. And the times that we've talked about it, you probably don't remember all the times that I brought it up. And that's why... What are you doing? Oh, poor Huck has got an itch. Yeah, poor Huck. Yeah, good? Is that good? She goes, thanks, Dad. Yeah, it's a good girl. Yeah, it's a good girl. Yeah. She's right here at my feet going, Dad, what are you doing? So you probably forget, and that's why I'm going to do this series. Sometimes it's hard to put it all together and really get a grasp on what's going on until I line them up for you. And that's what I'm going to do. The people and what they were doing differs greatly. The commonality is the geography and the area. Now, Dinky Creek. Talk a little bit about that. It's kind of right in between a creek and a river. It's a small river, big creek. It's beautiful. Gigantic boulders. That's kind of what it's now known for. It's also known for good fishing some of the time when there aren't a ton of people around. But has a good campsite there. And because it's not that far from civilization, it gets a lot of play from Fresno County residents and Southern Cal residents as well. So, without further ado, this case involves a man named Paul Martin Head. Paul Matthew Head, PMH. 32 years old, missing September 8th, 1999. Yeah, he disappeared in Fresno County, Dinky Creek area, a place called Sportsman Lake. Before we get too far into it, I'll just show you where this is. So, Dinky Creek is right here. One of the trailheads is right there. And then right there, that little lake at the base of Nelson Mountain, that's Sportsman Lake. From here to here is about 4 air miles. So this trailhead is about 2 air miles away Now, Dinky Creek runs all around. This is the campground. Creek runs out of the mountains. Well, Paul lived in San Luis Obispo, California. In the past, he had also lived in Mountain View, California. Now, for the previous year and several months, he had worked at a place called the Big Sky Cafe in SLO, San Luis Obispo. He and another employee named Shane Boschko worked at the cafe. The owner stated that Paul routinely talked about fishing and camping in the Sierras, and he and Shane got to be good friends and started talking about a trip to go camping up there. Now, Greg Holt was the owner of the Big Sky Cafe and said that the trip was not a spur-of-the-moment item or decision, and that Paul had claimed that he had been to that place before. Kind of keep that in the back of your head. So the guys, Shane and Paul, planned their trip, make sure they had a tent, sleeping bag, all those things you need. And then they drove, according to Shane, to the Dinky Creek campground and then hiked into Sportsman Lake to camp. Let's talk about Sportsman's Lake. It's not very big. It's about 10 acres in size, and it's at 9,200 feet. It's pretty high up there. It has brook trout, and like I said, it's about 4 air miles from the Dinky Creek area. And it's surrounded on all sides by granite. And there's dozens of lakes in that area. So if you get a chance, I want you to go to Google Earth and look up Sportsman Lake. Get an aerial view of it, and you will see granite everywhere. Not a big lake. The guys had told the owner that they were going to go to the lake and bring him back some trout. I can imagine that the fishing's probably decent at the lake just because it's a little bit of a haul to get there. Anytime you have to climb uphill anywhere, you start reducing the amount of people that are going to go. So September 7th, 1999, the guys drove from San Luis Obispo to Dinky Creek Campground. And then it's a little unclear if they hiked there on the 7th or spent the night in the campground and then hiked there on the 8th. But on September 8th, they were at Sportsman's Lake. They had their own tent. They were camping near the lake and near a stream for the lake. It was 9 o'clock. They had been asleep for a while. Yeah, I know that seems early, but so I'm thinking they must have hiked in there on that day. They were tired. Gets cold up there near 9,000 feet at night. Well, at 9 p.m., each man was asleep in his tent. At least that's what Shane thought. He was asleep, and he wakes up to what he described as a blood-curdling scream coming from Paul's tent. Now, if that was me, I think he's getting attacked by a mountain lion or grizzly bear, and I'd run over there with my gun. Well, he runs over there, and he sees Paul, he sees Paul removing his pants and his shoes. And he's trying to help him and slow him down, and he seems irrational and disoriented. And he runs out of the tent, and like I said, there's a stream nearby, and he falls into the stream. Well, the only thing he's wearing is a pair of boxer shorts and a sweatshirt. He He gets himself out of the creek. Still seems a little disoriented and obviously not himself. Shane's trying to help him, and he just takes off going around the lake. Shane goes back to his tent, lays down, and a short time later, Paul comes back asking for a flashlight. It was never stated whether Shane had a flashlight or if he gave him a flashlight. But Shane went back to sleep, and Paul took off again. It was confusing to Shane about what was going on, because he was in a straight frame of mind. Within all of the documents I read, it was stated that Paul may have smoked some weed that night. Well, weed doesn't do that to you, okay? Normal weed. So, the next morning, Shane wakes up expecting to see Paul in his tent, everything back to normal. Walks over to the tent. It looks like it did the night before, just completely disheveled, like something happened. He looks around. It's not that big of a valley, folks. Can't see anyone. Can't see Paul, can't see anything. Yells out Paul's name in the valley, no response. He decides to take a walk around the lake. Was that taking? Not very long. 10-acre lake. Comes back, doesn't see anything, doesn't hear anything. Paul's boots are still in the tent. Pants are still in the tent. Backpack, everything. He's confused about what he sees, because Paul had never acted like this around him. So he waits around a little bit more, hoping that Paul's going to come back, and he doesn't, and he decides he's got to go down and get some help. So he puts on his backpack, and he goes to the ranger station in Dinky Creek. He reports Paul as a missing person. The U.S. Forest Service at Dinky Creek calls the Fresno County Sheriff's Office that has a search jurisdiction there, and a Fresno County deputy responds. They sit down with Shane, and they're slowly getting all the information they need about Paul. Where it happened, what predated this. Well, Shane says to the deputy that the day before this all happened, they had drank a whole bottle of rum between the two of them, having fun. But he didn't say that Paul acted intoxicated that night, which would have been the following night. He didn't mention anything about that. He just said, yeah. And then it was brought up later on through one of the articles, and it was never clear how they got this information, that Paul may have smoked a joint that night. So the Fresno County deputies, he calls for a supervisor, says that they're going to need search and rescue, and they're going to need some deputies to immediately kick butt and go up to Sportsman Lake. Again, not an easy jaunt. So they get additional deputies, they get approval, and they call the highway patrol. You see, every jurisdiction, let me put it this way, California is divided into districts for the highway patrol. These districts are big. Every district has a helicopter. And the helicopters, they can be on call at any time. And for emergencies like this, they'll divert off their other assignments and come help. And they're used routinely for search and rescue throughout the state. These pilots are, what's wrong? You're crying. These pilots are highly trained. They've got FLIR on the helicopter. They're very well equipped. There was no helicopter in that immediate area, so they called for one the next day. They called for multiple search and rescue starting the next day. He got approval from a supervisor. And a couple of deputies took off for the lake, where they did find Paul's camping gear exactly where Shane said it would be. At the beginning here, I can imagine that the deputies were kind of wondering what was going on. Are these a couple of dope heads that got in over their head up there? You know, did Shane do something to Paul? A lot of questions, right? So they ask Shane to stay in the area because they want to keep talking to him. And the next day, the world starts to converge on Dinky Creek and Sportsman Lake. What happened is that because that lake at 9,200 feet is high, and you can't get there quickly, you either got to bring people into that lake by helicopter, or they've got to hike in and maybe spend the night. Well, the massive search starts, and they bring in ground pounders. They brought in equestrians. They had ATVs circling the greater area, hoping to find Paul coming out of the area on foot. None of that was happening. September 15th, full 7 days after Paul went missing, Fresno County Sheriffs gave their first major update. Their spokesman was a man named Don Cervantes. This is what he said, quote, "Head," meaning Paul, "doesn't have exceptional survival skills or great knowledge of the outdoors. As far as we know, this guy is just a normal camper hiker." Cervantes went on to say that the area around there, rocky and rugged. He said that for the last week, they put divers in the water at Sportsman Lake. Now stop right there. That is a dangerous practice if you're not super experienced. Because normally people dive at sea level, and you know how long you could stay underwater at what depth at sea level. Kind of memorize those things. As you go up in elevation, those numbers get totally skewed. If you don't have a dive computer with you, you could easily get killed. I'm sure that these divers had advanced computers with them, and they're very cautious. The theory being is that since Paul was walking around the lake, they thought, oh, he must have fallen in and drowned. That's what everybody always thinks, that whenever anyone disappears around water. Oh, they fell in and they drowned. Okay. Except they searched this 10-acre lake. They found nothing. They also broke up the lake into grids. And this was smart. And each team had a grid that they searched intently, looking for Paul. And when you look at that lake basin on Google Earth, you'll see it's not a hard place to find somebody. There isn't like a ton of ground coverage. In fact, there's not a lot. That's why them sending up helicopters was smart. They should have been able to find him. Cervantes went on to say that every day for the last 6 days, the search has been getting wider and wider. And they said that Fresno County is working with the State Office of Emergency Services to get more resources. And he said one of the first resources the state gave him was an Army National Guard Chinook helicopter, which had been joining the CHP helicopter every day. Oh, those things are not cheap to fly. Those Chinooks. I'll bet you $3,000 an hour. Now, because it's a National Guard helicopter, I must admit that I have no idea what kind of technical devices are on there compared to the CHP helicopter. I've been in the CHP helicopter before. It's got advanced avionics and a great FLIR system. So they also put 55 ground pounders, including volunteers, into that area. And then he said that the agencies that have been working to find Paul include Marin County, Kern County, Tulare County, and Kings County search and rescue teams, the California Youth Authority Law Enforcement Section, and the CHP. He said there has never been a slowing down in this search as it got wider and more expansive. This is Paul. He is a big guy. He's about 6'3", 215. Not overweight at all. A big target. This is a big man. You could kind of tell in the wording of Cervantes on the 15th that they were getting a little frustrated. And after 6 days of this much intensive search for Paul, I wouldn't have been surprised if they canceled the search right there, but they didn't. The next major update was September 17th. The Fresno County Sheriff said that they continued to scour the area around Shaver Lake. Remember, the disappearance before was right at the base of Shaver Lake and Dinky Creek. Janice Rasmussen, the Fresno County detective handling this case now, stated they are not looking at this incident as having foul play involved, which a lot of people had brought up and said, oh, there's got to be. They had already debriefed Shane multiple times. They looked at the evidence at the scene. She said that the area has a large amount of wild animals. Implication being that maybe it wasn't the best idea to leave in bare feet and boxer shorts. Rasmussen said that investigators have no idea what instigated Paul's odd behavior. I saw a lot of rumors over the internet about this. Oh, he was an alcoholic and he went into delirium and this caused it. Oh, he'd smoked a lot of weed and this caused it. I heard everything. No, I've been around alcoholics my whole career as a police officer. In downtown San Jose, they had tons of alcoholics that we'd have to deal with. I didn't proactively want to deal with them, but if a business today, this guy fell down drunk in front of my business, we'd have to call the drunk wagon and bring him in. So the search and rescue commander for Fresno County was a man named Lieutenant Jerry Gallagher. Let me quote him. We have not found a trace of Paul. There just comes a time when the chance of survivability is so low that it doesn't justify such widespread resources, end of quotes. He made that on September 20th. He said, we've gone 11 days of nonstop searching and have found nothing. He made the call as a lieutenant to terminate all search efforts. He did say that they'll continue from the air with the use of the CHP helicopter and one deputy that'll circle the area in a Jeep. He said that the deputies will be on the back roads, also talking to hunters in the area and asking them to keep their eyes open for anything unusual, somebody who's lost, etc. To me, that would have been the best opportunity. Hunters go off trail all the time. It was hunting season. He thought, we're coming right up into the biggest hunting season all year. There'll be thousands of people walking through the hillside. They probably thought they're going to stumble into this body. Just a matter of time. So there were posters put up all over. It was all over the radio. Everybody knew. Now, Paul's boss, Greg Holt, owner of the Big Sky Cafe, was interviewed by the press. And this got big press in San Luis Obispo and in Fresno County. Holt said that Paul was intelligent, friendly, and even-tempered. Let's stop right there. Intelligent, friendly, and even-tempered. Doesn't sound like he was that way on the night of September 8th. Holt went on to say, I've worked with him 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, for over a year. But I guess you never really know anyone that well. End of quotes. Holt said Paul was a big fan of the outdoors and often spoke about fishing and camping in the Sierras. And he confirmed that Paul had stated that he had been to this specific area where the guys were camping. September 22nd, 13th day of the search and rescue. Only one helicopter and one Jeep were still committed to the search. Detective Rasmussen stated that the case is still being handled as a missing person case and not criminal. Fresno County kept having to justify themselves over and over and over because people kept wanting to push the criminal aspect of the case. Oh, people just don't do this and it just doesn't happen and, come on. People just don't walk away in the middle of the night. Oh, really? Well, you haven't followed me very long then. September 23rd, Fresno County announced that all searching would stop. November 3rd, there was a newspaper update, and the sheriff was contacted and said Paul has not been located, and Fresno County submitted DNA samples to NamUs. NamUs is the United States depository for all missing persons' DNA. This is important. There were 100 different posts about this disappearance since it happened in 1999. And there were several innuendos on these that it was a criminal case and Paul had been murdered. So, since I stick to just facts, there are 0 facts that Paul got murdered. And the best people to know that would be the detectives handling the case. And they said that there's no foul play. So all of you amateur detectives out there can think what you want, but they found no evidence of a crime. All of his camping gear was found at Sportsman's Lake. Now, to stage all that gear way out there in the middle of nowhere would be a huge effort on the part of Shane. So my question would be, well, why not just set up a campsite at Dinky Creek and he just walked away in the middle of the night? So what? But to haul all that gear up there, that dog don't hunt. And then some people have implied that Paul was an alcoholic, hadn't had booze recently, lost his mind, and wandered into oblivion. If Paul was an alcoholic, then I guarantee you, Paul would have hauled up his own alcohol to make sure he would have made it through that weekend. Paul's boss again, Greg Holt. He'd employed Paul for over a year. In all the interviews he gave, he never mentioned Paul being an alcoholic or a drug user, just a hard worker. Now I've got a question for you. Most people, when they go into the woods at night, you're a little careful when you step out in the middle of the night because you really don't know what's there. Mountain lions, bears, what is out there? You don't know. So what would push someone to start screaming in their tent like they're getting killed, strip off their clothes, and go for a walk when the temperatures outside are cold? What would prompt that? So Paul was acting highly irrational. In the middle of nowhere, in the woods. When I was working this case up, I immediately thought of another case that I've given to you, and I'll put the link up here for that. It was a young man named Terrence Woods. Terrence was 27 years old, disappeared October 2018 in Oro Grande, Idaho. At the time, he was 27 years old, graduated from the University of Maryland, and he was working as an assistant on a film crew that had gone to a place called the Pittman Mine. Friends, I guarantee, I've been there. It's in the middle of Nowheresville. Well, the film crew got into the area and realized, we can't get to the site with our cars. So they hired a bunch of locals and their ATVs and to escort them up there with all of their equipment. So the locals said, okay, we'll do that. I actually interviewed the locals who did that. And they said, yeah, we drove them up there, carried their equipment up there. They paid us handsomely. And they were going to hopefully film ghosts around the mine. So these locals who I interviewed said that they're all standing around doing work, and they take a break, and there's like a ridge there, and you kind of look out into the valley, and friends, it's pristinely beautiful up there. But the road to get there, so I had a 4-wheel drive truck with some pretty high clearance, so I didn't have any problem getting there. But if you had a car, there's no way. ATV would be perfect. But when I went there, kind of a freaky place. I wouldn't call it a top 10 freaky place, but it's a little freaky. But these people say, yeah, there's like a whole line of people from the film crew and locals standing on this ridge looking. And these people said nothing unusual was going on. There was nothing strange that they could tell. Everyone was friendly and helpful, and there was no odd attitude or anything. And this guy said, now I know what this guy is telling me is the truth because I've read the reports. He said all of a sudden, one of the guys on the film crew, Terrence, takes off at a dead run as fast as you could go, downhill, into the wilderness, gone. Everyone's just looking around going, oh, what the heck was that? Why did he do that? So my question is, if you think about Terrence's case, and you think about Paul's case, what could have happened to change their mind that running into the wilderness was better than staying in your tent or staying with the film crew and these locals? What could have been better out there than right here? Well, Terrence's dad got involved after he heard all this, and he thought that somebody on the crew must have threatened him. Well, Terrence had called his dad earlier in the week, said everything was going great, no problems, everyone was getting along, he was fine. He had intended to work with this crew another month, and he never said anything to his dad about wanting to leave or quitting. So since I first aired Terrence's case, and once again, I'll put that link up there so you can watch it if you haven't seen it. What would it cost us? And since then, I've gotten 100 responses. The most common one I got is that people who have been abducted by UFOs and things say that the aliens talk to you mind to mind. They call it mind speak. Exactly the same way some Bigfoot people say that Bigfoot talks to them mind to mind. Now, because Paul never acknowledged Shane and said to him what was wrong, never explained anything, and neither did Terrence, how do we know they didn't see something odd? They didn't get some mind speak? Everyone around both of those people said that they had acted rationally. Now, I should say that on Terrence's crew, they said that the hours before he disappeared, he was acting a little odd. But before that, no, he was normal. And Shane had said that he'd never seen Paul act like that before he disappeared. Nor did Mr. Holt. So, I'm being serious. This is a really tough one. Both of these. People who just disappear and are never found. Now, there was a huge search for Terrence for days. Same with Paul. No, never found. And in Terrence's case, it's been over 7 years, and hundreds of hunters have gone through that area. His body's never been found. In Paul's case, it's been 26 years, and thousands of hunters have gone through that area, and he's never been found. So in my mind, I wonder, are they still even there? How can they be? Where are they? Well, friends, there's more to come on Dinky Creek. I appreciate you being here. It's a very perplexing situation. And when I talk to you about more cases in the future, you'll see these are not all hunters. These are quite a variety of people. Now, I thought that Mr. Holt's statement about Paul being smart was interesting. We don't know. Was he an intellectual? Was he high functioning? I really don't know. I can't dig into his background. So be kind, be friendly, and know that you are appreciated. And if you could do me a favor, and you could put these on your social media, I think people, once they see that there's a string of associated people with a location, an occupation, etc., they're more willing to start to accept the realities of the facts I give you. So before we talked about missing physicists, now we're talking about a location and people missing. Thanks for being here. Kindness, the kindness revolution. Be safe. Paulides out.